All right, what's up, everybody? We're back for another. It's been a little while, but we're back for another deck tech. It's taken a while to get this one because I was responsible for Boltyn and the deck builder of the team. I am not. So I want to give a quick shout out before we even get started to Joe. He has been on our live streams and stuff. I mentioned how hard I've been trying to figure out Boltyn. He threw me some lists, and it has helped a tremendous amount. That has been like his baby. It has been his baby in the way that Prism has been Dane's and Chain has been Jason's. So he shared a ton of lists. So I want to say thanks to him first and foremost, and I appreciate his help. I got Dane here with me. We're going to talk through the Boltyn list that I have been testing pretty heavily. I've tested it in real life. I've tested it on TTS. I've done it on our weekly streams. I have been running this thing into the ground trying to test it. So Dane is here. He's been helping me test it. Yeah. So Dane, how's it going, man?
It's going super well. I'm excited. I like our back and forths on these videos and picking brains, but also I'm personally invested in this list because I was excited for Boltyn as well. And seeing you find and test a list, because I'll be honest, I've been pretty busy with like Prism and testing that and like just trying to figure stuff out with her, and Boltyn has not been a priority of mine at all, but seeing you finally run something that looks really interesting to me gets me super excited. So I'm excited to pick your brain about it too.
Yeah, this is a really explosive list. I think that's the key. Is the Raiden list I found is the list that can have like the big explosive turns. So this is obviously a Raiden list. I think we will try and eventually do an Axe's list. I've been working on an Axe list, but that one's a little more tricky because there are things that you have to mess with. Things like Razor Reflex are tricky in that, whereas in this one, Razor is just good across the board. It hits everything. So it's figuring out ratios and stuff for the Axes is a little different. So we loaded out with Arcanite, Skullcap, Bracers. I have Tunic in there for value, but I have been testing Vestige of Soul because you do sometimes, with it being a red and yellow heavy deck, sometimes you do have to pitch a second time, and getting a little extra value out of that red pitch to cover something like Bolting Blade on the back end is actually something I found that's been pretty helpful, because turning a second red card in your hand into the two that you need to cover Bolting Blade, considering how much you put cards in your soul, has actually been really good. So Tunic is something that's being considered coming out because they're both Blade Break anyway, so I don't change my ability to block different with that. I think Snapdragons is the definite heavy favorite to be run in pretty much every matchup, but I have Valiant Dynamo in as a testing option because Katsu exists. He won that ProQuest over in New Zealand, so it's hard not to respect his game, and that's helpful in that matchup, but even then, it's not massively helpful. So it's possible Valiant Dynamo comes out for something else.
That was my big, like, just looking at the equipment off the bat, I was curious, like, because Valiant Dynamo is just an awesome piece of equipment in general, but in the Raiden build, like, we'll get into the list a little more, but hearing you say that it's just for like testing purposes to see how it feels into like maybe a longer game where they are just pinging you a little more, that makes a lot more sense to me, because at first I was like, are you swinging many times with a weapon? But that makes sense that you're just testing it.
Yeah, I'm testing it because honestly, at first I thought, well, it could be good at Chain. You know, Chain can go really wide and throw random ones at you sometimes. But the reality of it is you don't really swing Raiden enough to get value in the short game that Chain exists, and you'd probably just rather have Snapdragons. So we're going to move into the list. And the most important thing in Raiden, something that I think is incredibly key to realize and keep in mind, is that the most important thing to prioritize is keeping cards in hand to charge, especially early. It's interesting because what I've found with Boltyn is that it's kind of, as somebody who's tested a fair amount of Chain and played a fair amount of Chain into it and played it myself, one of the things I find is that like Chain early game wants to be defensive in order to set up his later game, like his mid to late game. Boltyn sometimes needs to like really prioritize armor blocks and be very light on block early in order to set up the soul, because the soul is so important. And in this current build, I have 39 cards that charge my soul that just purely say the word charge. That doesn't include Soul Shield, and it doesn't include Via the Vanguard, because those ones put cards in my soul, but they're there for a different purpose. They're not necessarily charged, because like V is going to take my whole hand. Soul Shield happens on my opponent's turn and isn't charging, but the rest of them are there specifically to charge and to get the effects.
So just to clarify, though, via the Vanguard does say charge. You can charge any number of times, right?
Yeah.
But like Soul Shield doesn't. Soul Shield does not count as charging, because charging specifically refers to the rule
Charging, yeah, the keyword
charge. Yeah, the keyword charge. Yep. Okay, cool. All right.
Yep. So what I run very few blues. A few of the blues that I do run are here right away in Bolt of Courage and Engulfing Light. The main reason I run those blues is because every now and then it is nice to have a blue. You can pitch a blue for a take flight, charge, and then go into a Bolting Blade with those two floating. So it's a really strong 3-card combo. If you have Bolting Blade, which in my opinion, Bolting Blade is like the card you want to see at the end of a turn to go into the arsenal, because that's the best place to play Bolting Blade from, is from your arsenal. It's incredible on the back of Via the Vanguard. Absolutely incredible off of V. And it's just great off the back of anything where it's like a 1-card charge that has go again somehow into it. So it's really strong, but also because I love the head games. Dane knows that. And I love the fact that Bolt and Engulfing are both 1 damage attacks that have on-hit effects if you've charged. So it's possible, if I have the resource curve correct, I will play something like Take Flight, pitching a red or a yellow that I want to get back into my deck, swing with the Raiden, use a soul to give it go again, and then I'll end on a blue Bolt of Courage or Engulfing Light to try and get an extra card into soul for the turn, or to just draw a card to arsenal if I don't have an arsenal card. Because a lot of times, like when people will block Raiden, they'll block a 3 or a 4 attack, but they hate blocking that 1 at the end. But you put them in a weird spot with the hit effects, which is something I like about this deck, is that in classic warrior fashion, it's hard to block, or it's complicated to block, because if you've charged, it affects the value of your blocks versus the value of the damage. And it can mess with like the hit effects. Things that swing for 2s and 3s that have hit effects can just all of a sudden become pumped over a 2 or a 3 block, which I think is really, really key to remember.
And one of the things that I hate so far playing into this deck is just the Razor, and you'll get into like your Razor loadout too, but the fact that like just throwing like one of these 1s or 2s at you, like the Bolt of Courage or Engulfing Light in blue or yellow, like it's right back to that overblock nonsense. Because it's if I don't block this, like I'll just take the 1, and you're like, okay, cool, well, I'm gonna draw a card, I'm gonna Razor it, I'm gonna draw a card off it hitting, have go again, and just continue my turn. It's like, I don't want to drop 2 cards on that block. It's so painful.
Yeah,
Dude, it's so painful.
It's very much the thing. It's funny because I couldn't figure out like the parallels, right? Like you know they have parallels in how they build decks, or they want decks to be played in this game. And I'm like, Boltyn is a warrior, Dorinthia is a warrior, but Dorinthia is so weapon centric, and Boltyn is not. He's full of attack action cards, which was so weird to me. And then slowly I've realized, if you play a charge heavy deck, what makes him a warrior? He's a pain in the ass to block. He's like classic warrior. Like it's just it's going to make you miserable blocking cards. So some of the cards that I think are really important to the deck that are lower quantities are Courageous Steel Hand. It's basically like a free Razor if you've charged. The thing I don't like about it is it makes me think of Iron Song Response and Dory, which you only run in red, because the reprise needing to be on for the 3 is similar to the charge needing to be on for the 3. So I just run the red because it's the most powerful version of it, and then it can turn 1s and 2s into pushing over smaller blocks or miss blocks with the charge. And then Battlefield Blitz is just really, really good. Originally, I just was running the red, but the fact that it just inherently has go again if you've charged is really good off the back of something like a Take Flight. You can, pitch a yellow, Take Flight, charge a card, Battlefield Blitz, straight into Raiden, and you had just a really explosive, 3-wide turn effectively, and it's just really strong. It's a really, really good card. So a lot of the cards are in here for like support of the main engine, which is the charge engine. Valiant Thrust again is a card that I haven't read, that I might try to find room for in yellow, just because that +3 buff off a charge is absolutely insane. Hitting a Valiant Thrust, take flight into a Valiant Thrust, into a Bolting Blade from your arsenal is absolutely absurd and completely insane, because it's just really, really big numbers that are really powerful. But to Dane's point, one of the things I love about this deck is that, and maybe something I love about Monarch in general, is it brings out some of these other colors of cards. Like Yellow Pummel is a thing because of Prism. Yellow Razor is a thing because it just works for Boltyn. People get greedy and don't want to block some of these charge cards because they don't want the buff. So you go, cool, you're just going to take the 2. Sounds good. I'll go ahead and Razor it so I still get my hit effect, but more importantly, I now just have Go Again. It's like running Razor and Chain. And it's really good. It's great to pump over things. And even if somebody doesn't block it, that's the thing to keep in mind, is you've pumped the card now. So if somebody correctly blocks a card and they defense reaction to block 6, but you just need to Go Again into something, Razor gives it the buff, and now Boltyn can give it the Go Again from his soul.
Go Again. Yep.
So it's effectively Go Again on a card no matter what. It's like a Go Again. As long as you have a soul and a resource, it gives you Go Again regardless of hitting or not. And that's just something that I think is really, really good in the deck. I love Bolting Blade. It's kind of become like one of my favorite cards of the set as I've played Boltyn, because like I said, Bolting Blade from the arsenal is absolutely the most crazy thing in the world, especially off the back of like Via the Vanguard. If you can Via the Vanguard into something, swing with Raiden, and then, oh, hey, by the way, here's a Bolting Blade for 9. Like just for 9, just an easy 9. And oh, it's free because I charged twice off of Via the Vanguard. It's Cataclysm without Go Again, and it actually costs you 2 positive soul. So it's really, really, really good. And then I have Cataclysm in at 3, kind of for the same reason, because your soul sometimes does get, if you get a lot of your charge cards early, you can really pump your soul and have a lot of cards and really, really expend a lot of energy. And sometimes I've had turns where like I've looked down and realized I've had like 7 cards in soul and I'm still charging, and it's like, man, I could really use a Celestial Cataclysm right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the 2 probably most valuable or most explosive cards outside of like a Take Flight are definitely Via the Vanguard and Lumina Ascension. What they accomplish and what they do for the deck is why they're Boltyn specializations. I mean, they make the deck go round. I think Lumina is a card that at first I underappreciated because it does take a little more setup than Via the Vanguard. Via the Vanguard is just explosive. Like the second you get it in your hand, you just kind of are willing to take some damage because you know you probably can output a lot of damage back. Lumina Ascension requires a little setup. It's often a card I will arsenal, or the reason I will arsenal like a Take Flight, because you desperately need to be able to hit that. You need to be able to hit that charge before you go into Lumina in order to really be efficient about it and get that extra swing. Because the beauty of Raiden is getting the charge means it's easy to give it Go Again, and people will get weirdly greedy. Like I assumed at first that Lumina would be the kind of card that people would just block because you're swinging, and they would want to block it to not give you the health effect and the positive soul. But that's what makes the card so interesting and unique, is that you can pitch a soul to give it Go Again and then just immediately get that soul right back if people let it hit. But because you've charged, because you've put a card in your soul that turn, Boltyn's ability is on, which makes the Raiden really complicated to block because it's a 4 already. So now you have to block with a 3 and a 2 block, or 2/3 blocks, to kind of keep it under control and not let that thing spiral on you. And then the only defense reaction I run the deck right now is Soul Shield, mainly because I don't want to bog the deck down. It's definitely a really aggressive deck. I think the right way to play Boltyn is really aggressive. It is something that as a deck needs to be piloted with that mentality that sometimes you're just going to absorb a lot of damage because you can give it back and blocking out basically doesn't do any good for you. Like, so the cards in the deck that you need are really impactful, and if you block with them, you basically just lose all of your gas in the deck, and you just
Yeah.
can't give them up, which is kind of challenging. That's definitely something in the deck that has taken me time to learn, is that sometimes you just, no matter how much it hurts, you just got to kind of eat a whole turn of damage, because you can give it right back to them with Take Flight, via the Vanguard, Lumina Ascension, Bolting Blade, Cataclysm. Like, those are cards that can really put damage back out. It's just challenging at times because you do have to be the aggressor with Boltyn. That's the one thing I would say that can be a little challenging, is you are kind of forced into being the aggressor at all times. And if you get behind, it can be hard if you don't see the right cards to catch up.
Yeah. So it seems to me, like, just looking at this list and the way you got it built, one thing that I didn't see that I was sort of expecting when we were talking about this is I don't see like any plunder runs or anything just to give like that flat positive to allow the go again on attacks that possibly don't have the buff, so you can't give the go again. Was that taken out? Like, was that early stages you realized you didn't need it because of all the charge anyways, or what was the rationale behind that? Because I know there's a lot of people running that right now.
Yeah, the challenge with Plunder Run in this versus something like Chain is that Chain definitely has setup turns. And with Boltyn, it's I think the thing that I've learned is it's a very hand-intensive deck. It requires your whole hand basically every turn, and oftentimes you need 3 cards in your hand in order to have a really productive turn. So having to hold a Plunder Run until the end of your turn ends up being kind of challenging, because you're not able to get it into Arsenal as much as you want. A lot of times the only way you get cards into Arsenal in this deck consistently is by having maybe a little underwhelming turn the turn before to stall on like a Bolting Blade or Cataclysm so that you can finish it on a big turn. The other issue is that like the turns that you draw is about the only turn you really get in Arsenal, which Plunder Run does. The problem is you're not going as wide, right? So Chain gets the benefit.
So block it, right?
Yeah, they're just going to block the one attack, and then you don't get the draw off of it, and you kind of just, you're left without a lot of without a net positive that really helps you in the deck, because you're probably sacrificing something to hold it. I found that what ended up happening was Plunder Run would become the least valuable card in my hand a lot because it was a 2-block. So I would play something like a Take Flight, and I would want to pitch another charge card in order to get it back into my deck to consistently keep charge cycling in my deck, and then I'd end up charging Plunder Runs. So I think one game I looked down and realized I had like 3 of the 7 cards in my soul were Plunder Runs, and I thought to myself, maybe that card shouldn't be in the deck if every time I see it I think to myself, this is the worst card in my hand.
I should charge this.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So looking at something else I noticed too is that you've got 9 2-blocks in here, right? So it's I know that you love your heavy 3-block warrior.
Yep.
So is one of the lines, just like thinking through like what you've said so far about how you play the deck, it seems to me like you're building a ton of soul. Do you sort of pitch those cataclysms early, anticipating that in the late game you might need to be blocking with hand a little more to stay alive and be able to still reapply pressure with like a 7 attack that only costs you 1 card from, like, you could block with 3 cards from hand, have a cataclysm, and still put on a 7 damage question out there to see and force some cards out of their hand back. Like, is that sort of part of your game plan, or are you just all gas until someone peters out and you're throwing cataclysms mid game? Like, what's your thought process with that?
Yeah, I would prefer personally to definitely use cataclysms as pitch fodder early, because the Bolting Blades and Enlightened Strikes are better early. I'm obviously more willing to take damage early, so Enlightened Strike is much better. The other thing to keep in mind is that you're not contingent on the charging to be able to give something that has a buff go again, right? That's not part of the contingency. It just has to have a buff in order to give soul or use your soul. So because of that, Enlightened Strike for 7 can have a card pitched for go again. And that's another, I think, head game you can play, right? You put a card in Arsenal, like maybe a Bolting Blade, and you have an Enlightened Strike left over with a card that you're just going to bottom for it. And I will absolutely unequivocally play the games of just trying to fish things out of people. We love to talk about like one of the funny things you can do in this deck is like swing with Raiden for 0, even though you haven't charged, and just see what people do to it. And sometimes you have to play those games of like giving Enlightened Strike go again to kind of make someone think that maybe if they have a defense reaction, they'll just, instead of taking 7, all of a sudden you give it go again and there's a card in your arsenal, and they're like, oh, okay, maybe I should block something. Like, I'll just use my defense reaction for 4 now, because if that attacks 2, it's going to feel bad to overblock that and eat too much on Enlightened Strike. And then just pass turn, because like I said, sometimes you get soul so much that you can actually burn it just to try and force cards and things out of people's hands and arsenals that maybe they didn't want to give up. So I like Enlightened Strike and Bolting Blade early. Those are the cards that I tend to arsenal early or keep early, whereas Cataclysm is definitely kind of your mid to late game tempo swing. That's how you're going to try and swing the tempo, is hopefully having a Cataclysm.
Yeah, being able to still block out some damage on like that turn 7 or 8 when you're, sub 15 life, being able to block some of it, be able to keep like a Cataclysm and maybe a free attack or something like that. Just be able to still put on, 7 to 9 points of pressure.
Yep.
Force cards out while still mitigating some damage. That makes tons of sense.
Yeah.
So, question for you now. When I was first testing this, before you kind of took the reins on it and Joe reached out to you, which again, dude, thanks so much, Joe, for kind of helping us out with the shout out there. It's been great chatting with you too. But Take Flight, man, that was like one of my favorite cards. Like, how do you feel? Is that still like the powerhouse? Like, it's just such a good staple card in the deck. Like, is it still kind of sitting at that spot? Because I remember when you first started testing this a lot, and I was telling you like what my favorite card was. I thought Take Flight was just like the workhorse of the deck. Is that kind of still where it sits for you, or is it? Are you starting to appreciate and love a little like other cards a little more?
There are definitely cards that I love and appreciate that maybe I didn't appreciate as much. Like I said, Lumina is definitely of that.
Okay. Yeah.
Bolting Blade has continued to just get better and better, but Bolting Blade is really at its peak paired with Take Flight, because Take Flight is the thing that kind of enables that card. I love Take Flight. I think it's the best card in the deck, because it does everything that you want to do, and it allows for consistent swings with Raiden. That's the biggest thing, is that some of the cards require you to kind of jump through hoops. That's why Snapdragons are in there, is because sometimes you need to Snapdragon something that's a 0 cost charge that doesn't have go again. If they refuse to block, you just have to Snapdragon in order to get that go again, so that way you can go into something else. Take Flight is just absolutely absurd, because being able to Take Flight, charge, go again, I'll just swing Raiden for 3 for 0. So you just need to be able to pitch a red and charge literally any card, and you're good to go. I will say one of the things I found with the deck is that charging is of so much importance to the deck that sometimes you have to be willing to charge cards that maybe you don't want to charge, or that you wouldn't see yourself charging. I've charged Cataclysms, I've charged Enlightened Strikes, because sometimes the cards in the deck are just so good that you need. It sounds crazy to say, but sometimes if you're not set up for something else, you can sacrifice one of those cards early to really get the deck going. The other thing about Take Flight that I think stuck out to me that I missed the first time that can really set up these crazy go wide turns is that it has go again if you've charged this turn. You don't have to charge on the play of Take Flight in order to get a go again. So if you have one in Arsenal and then you draw another one, you can play a Take Flight, charge, and then play another Take Flight, and that one just has go again because you've charged this turn. And I think that that's a really important thing that hopefully people don't read over, but I know, card game players, that's always the joke, right? Card game players can't read. As much as we should be able to read, card game players naturally just skim random things or miss random things on cards. And some of these go again effects or these charge effects, we miss the fact that it just says if you've charged this turn. That's why I like to throw some of the engulfing lights and things at the end of turns, is because it says if you charge this turn. So if you charge on a Take Flight, swing a raid and give it go again, drop a 1 or a 2, then the effect will still trigger if it hits, because it's if you've charged this turn. So just make sure you read all of those effects really thoroughly, that they're not like they don't have to be done on that specific card's play. They can be done at like the end or at the beginning, and then they still take effect no matter when they occur in the turn.
Yep. So I've also seen, worth noting, and it seems like in the playing into you, I've noticed something about your deck or this build that I haven't noticed with other builds that I've played against. So in most Boltyn builds, I've seen a lot of, I'll charge this soul, use it right away to give go again, and like basically the soul that I'm building is also the soul I'm using, and then I net 0 on the soul, or even have a turn where I go down a soul, like, you know what I mean? So like I see that a lot. This deck and this build, I think because of the take flight and because of the battlefield blitz, like you can net positive soul very consistently, which I think is huge. Huge when you're looking for like a late game push turn, like being able to take flight, charge a card into a battlefield blitz, into a Raiden, all of that netted you 1 soul. You didn't spend a single soul to do all of that.
Absolutely.
Which is golden in Boltyn. And I think that's really key to notice that like that's like your soul is just another resource you gotta keep track of and know sort of where you're at with it, what you've got in your deck still it's going to be netting you positive soul, what you've got that's going to be costing you like excessive soul. So I think that is a huge difference I've noticed with this build that I really, really like about it, and I'm really excited to get my hands on it.
Yeah, this deck has a way about it where it can be really aggressive while aggressively building soul early game. And I think that that's part of the reason that I am pretty finicky about being willing to take a fair amount of damage up front. The first couple turns, as long as somebody isn't pressuring me for like game on turn 2, I'm pretty much willing to take, 10 or 12 damage in the first few turns if it means I can get soul built up, because I think that this deck exists in a world where if you can get to the mid game and have a big via the Vanguard or Lumina Ascension turn, then you can take the tempo and hold the tempo. It very much has that warrior feel in the sense that once you gain tempo, you can pretty consistently keep the tempo and really pressure your opponent and dare them to take a massive turn. But then to your point earlier, that's why Cataclysm pitching early is so important, because then when they have a turn where they feel like maybe they can put the pressure on you and you're holding Cataclysm with like 7 soul, you go, cool. We're fine here. You just block 9 with your heavy 3 block deck, because to your point again, it's a heavy 3 block deck, and you just go, and I don't really have much I'm going to do. We're just going to Cataclysm for 7. And it really just in the middle to late game, when your life totals are close or they're behind you a little bit and you throw a 7 at them, it puts them in that weird spot where they have to do something about it.
Yep.
So the last thing that I think I probably just want to mention is potential changes. One of the things that I do want to test in the deck, especially in Classic Constructed, I don't know that it's even worth considering in Blitz, is I'm interested in testing Library in the deck, because the deck is very yellow heavy, and as a result of being very yellow heavy, you could probably trigger or potentially trigger the Library on multiple turns. And I think having a 5-card hand with the potential arsenal with Boltyn could be absolutely just bonkers and completely insane. So I'm interested in testing it and trying it just for the sake of trying it. That's one of the things that I want to try just for the sake of trying to get a bigger hand size, because that's the one thing the deck can suffer with sometimes is later game, if you don't see a Cataclysm or something, you can feel like you can just lose a turn because you have to block to stop someone's impactful cards. So definitely want to give that a shot, because it is a yellow heavy deck. And yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with where the deck is right now. I think that it's in a really good spot, and I'm excited to just keep grinding games with it and giving it testing and push through it. I know I'm kind of ready now where like this one feels pretty safe and secure. It's like the real minimal tweaking, and I'm kind of ready to go, okay, how do we make axes work? Because that's kind of the next thing. Because I do like the Axis build. It's really interesting, but it doesn't feel like it has... That deck feels more like tempo, kind of like chugging along, consistently pushing damage. And this deck just feels like, you're out on the battlefield and things are going okay, and then all of a sudden this guy just comes screaming out with like face paint, and there's just blood flying off of him from somebody he just chopped in half, and he's just running full speed at you. You're like, oh god, oh god, oh god, because it just has those turns where it just, you're like, what just happened? I just ate 17 damage because I was gonna try and have a big turn, and I got too committed to the big damage stop. I'll take whatever comes my way, and you're like, I just took 14. Mistake. Mistake. So yeah, that's the deck in a nutshell. I'm excited about it. I would love to hear other people's opinions. I have tested this one quite a bit. Joe, he said he's tested it a ton before he even gave me like a baseline list. So this deck has been tried and true. It has consistently performed well. I've played it at locals against just other people, not just Dane and Jason, and have had some good success with it. I've played it into Chain a ton of times. I've played it into Katsu. I have yet to play like a Warrior Mirror with Dory, so that's something I am very interested to test and try. But yeah, that is Boltyn. So if you guys have any opinions or thoughts, throw them down in the comments. We would love to hear them. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so if you enjoy the videos. We are going to hit Levia next because that's a deck that I know Dane has been working on. We're getting close on that, and we're actually getting ready to do Prism 1.1 or 2.0. Or,
I don't know if we're going to do 1.1 or 2.0, whatever it ends up being.
Whatever it ends up being.
But plot twist, it's changed.
Yes.
Like, it's funny because I remember being where you are with Boltyn. I remember thinking, like, I think I've got this like pretty well tweaked, and I'm just like making minor changes or learning how to play it into different builds. And then, like, dude, I just remember flipping through cards and being like, I wonder how Zealous Belting feels. And like just throwing that in there and being like, wow, dude, feels really good. Like, so there's been some aha moments I've had with that list that I'm excited to share with the world. So we'll have that coming out here too.
Yep, and we've got Chain coming out. Jason is on like he's on take number 642.9, I think, is where he's.
We got to do it. We got to have a rule with him. We got to be like, Jason, you have to play 5 games or 10 games with the deck before you make changes.
Jason is
like, I hated this card. It sucked. It's like, into that one matchup, I swear.
You played one game. So we've got some more deck techs coming. We're going to try and just keep rolling through them. We're going to stay pretty consistent to the Classic Constructed. I know people have asked about Blitz. A lot of these lists can be stripped down, and you can kind of take the big cards out. Maybe we'll do like a Blitz like a Blitz video, right, where we just blitz through like, here's a Blitz deck for all of the things, here's the key points, boom boom boom. It's like 20 minutes, it covers all 4 decks in Blitz or something. But we'll see. We'll talk about that. We're going to focus on Classic Constructive right now because that's what we love. Thank you guys for listening. We appreciate you always checking out the videos. We love the amount of response people have been giving. The interaction has been absolutely spectacular lately. We absolutely love it. We love that you guys are giving us feedback and helping us, I mean, a ton with these decks. This one literally wouldn't have happened without feedback from you guys. So thank you so much. We appreciate it a ton. Dane, thanks for hanging out with me and talking through the deck, and we'll see you guys next time.
Peace.